Welcome one, welcome all. I'll introduce myself. My name is Neil Griffin. I'm a vice president over here at Northspyre. And I'm going to look this way, but my PowerPoint's over here, by the way. So I'm going to try to look at you guys this way. And if I'm ever looking over here, it's because I'm looking at the slides and making sure I'm navigating. But I started my career in construction and real estate. Didn't know I'd end up in software, and started working for a large general contractor. Then I moved to New York and was more doing like lender's rep and owner's rep work. Met William Sankey, the founder of Northspyre, and convinced him on a subway on the A train from Tribeca to the Franklin Avenue station that I would be helpful. And I've been here ever since. So hopefully, whether it's product expert stuff, that's kind of where I come in. And today it's going to be more, actually not really product related, but more value proposition related. And I think the goal of today will be to, I think, really kind of talk about the different ways that we see and we hear Northspyre clients get value from the product and the offering for a couple reasons. One, so that as an organization, you can kind of have eyes wide open in terms of, the things that you might be already seeing value in, but maybe other frontiers where y'all could get even more value and kind of return on investment from Northspyre. And two, for like internal stakeholders, like as you look across the organization, being aware of what the value proposition might be for, different kind of roles, responsibilities, departments, personas inside your organization, so that either if you're one of those stakeholders, that you can be eyes open for that value, or if you're a leader at a development organization, you can help ensure that your team's getting the full value as individuals, individual personas. And then the third lens I want to talk about is some of the kind of external value proposition for your partners, namely lenders or any investors, JV partners. So, I think this is a little bit interesting in the fact that it's kind of almost a sales training that I give a lot of the people at Northspyre. But I think as an organization, right, anybody using software, right, like you kind of need to sell it to the org and have eyes wide open in terms of the ways that you create value. So this is not going to be really a technical product-focused call. Hopefully it helps carve out different ways that you might think about using the product so that when you meet next with your customer success manager, your real estate transformation consultant, that, you can say, hey, we talked about how Northspyre would allow us to leverage data to do X, Y, and Z. Show me how that would work actually in the product. That's a little bit of an intro today. It's probably stuff that I've already covered here in a couple of these slides. If you have any questions, right, obviously just a different ways to reach us and get to know more about Northspyre, get more value from Northspyre. Obviously, your real estate transformation consultants who you already know, they, if you don't know the name of their dog or their cat or their kid or their hobby, it's meant to be that personalized. So ask. If you want something a little bit less personalized where you can kind of hide behind an email or chat box, the concierge at northspyre.com is a good email address for like just quick answers. We have a support team that's just constantly maintaining that because, as you know, our RATCs are constantly and oftentimes in meetings. So if it's like a hot item or just a quick issue, quick question, the concierge help desk is a good place to go. And of course, we have this self-serve knowledge base, which is available at knowledge.northspyre.com. It's also linked inside the application in the top right. Couple upcoming, we're going to do the ROI with Northspyre, be on the lookout. I don't know if y'all are all signed up for the rest of these, but a lot of good things. We've obviously done a lot with the project scheduling tool that we're going to continue to train people on. A lot of advancements there over the last 6 months. New integration with Sage Intact. We have a new, a lot of fancy new vendor management tools. So anyway, be on the lookout as we're continuing to do more and more of these. So today's agenda, I kind of already outlined this. Org level value proposition for different internal stakeholders by roles, value proposition for external stakeholders, to make you guys more successful as individuals and as organizations. So let's dive in. 407, let's see if we can do this by 4:30. Okay, key learning, same thing as the agenda, right? Where to drive value, how to sell value internally and externally. So let's talk about the organizational level first. When we talk with real estate teams, I think when we kind of ask them, this is not comprehensive, but of the things that they're thinking about, I guess, given, the market dynamics and, everybody's focused on getting kind of easier, more predictable returns on projects. A lot of what leaders are thinking about is having tighter control and visibility over projects, making sure that the workflows and how they work is fast and data-driven, whether that inspires more speed to market or that inspires just better decision-making along a whole array of decisions through the development cycle, which we'll talk through in a little bit more detail. or just generally probably the most like low hanging fruit. I don't think this is the most compelling value proposition for Northspyre because, I think the metaphor is like, you could drive a car to work, right? And maybe it takes 15 minutes today. If I get you there in 13 minutes, that's good, right? That could be meaningful, right? Depending on what meeting you might make or miss. But, if we can help avoid you getting T-boned in an intersection, God forbid, and give you better GPS, self-handling, automatic braking, and that kind of risk management lens of Northspyre, right? I think that's where a lot of where, we hear from clients where, hey, they were really focused on maybe some time savings early on, but then they end up really seeing the value proposition, obviously with the time savings and allowing to focus more on, allowing their team to focus more on the strategic direction of their roles and their projects, but also doing that in a way that's very kind of risk management focused. So, these are like maybe what teams are trying to achieve. I think at an organizational level, there's a couple things going on in terms of kind of why. On the risk management front, right? Like it's all about mitigating budget and schedule risk, right? Your project goes over budget, right? Less returns. If your schedule increases, there could be some penalties for that, but obviously with interest rates where they are, your returns could get quickly eaten alive by, an expanded interest reserve budget. So, a lot of teams right now, I guess in an inflationary, well, hopefully less inflationary environment. I think everybody's been watching what's going on. Fed met this week, but obviously with supply chain and just, construction cost stuff, and generally kind of with where the capital markets are, where they are, right? Like execution is at a premium. Not any old, dude on the gal on the side of the street can, get a loan, buy a piece of dirt and develop and make some money these days, right? It takes like professional, strategic, really well-orchestrated development organizations that are, surviving and if not thriving in this market. Obviously, right, like, I think development, everybody knows, right, it is, it's a cyclical market, right? There's going to be slower times based off of either supply demand, microeconomic things going on in the geographies you're developing in, or, interest rates. But, when it turns on and it's time to go, right, being first to move, so you're also first to deliver, right? And you can scale and you can get in while the getting's good. I think, and do that without having to balloon up your staff and hire this team and increase your administrative burden. We hear a lot of teams thinking about like how Northspyre in good times, right, can allow them to increase the capacity of their development pipeline without having to scale administrative count. And in bad times, right, obviously not have to be in a position where they're having to lay people off, which is nice. And, but also, to be able to kind of keep institutional knowledge and processes refined and tuned so that, even in bad times they can execute. And then when the good times come back around, right, they're ready to go. And then obviously, I think in the business development, right, you're trying to make money for yourself, but, you're obviously trying to make money for your financial partners, right? So they'll do more deals with you in the future, and then lenders, right? So they'll also do more deals with you in the future. And we'll talk a little bit more about those kind of stakeholders as part of that kind of external level value proposition a little bit later on. So just some of the fundamentals, right? I think at a base layer, right, this is what I would say. These are the things that kind of enable those value propositions, right? And a lot of it comes around just, the differences between, everybody loves a spreadsheet. I love a spreadsheet. I play around with spreadsheets all the time, right? And I think they have a place, right? But when it comes to the like science, spreadsheets are for artists, right? And we all have a little artist inside of us. And there's certainly an art of the deal. And that's obviously where the pro forma and the financial model and a really good, spreadsheet can tell you a lot based off of, go or no go. And kind of modeling out all the different scenarios and assumptions that you might make. When it comes to the actual like execution of the deal, right? That's more science. That's project management. And spreadsheets quickly become a reliability on that side. And so obviously you're all our Northspyre customers. So there's some of these things you kind of already gravitated to and making a decision to empower your team or yourself with Northspyre. But, I think a lot of the kind of base layer, like kind of binaries we see between teams that are leveraging a product like Northspyre. Obviously, we think we have a great product, but, a solution, a modern technology solution like Northspyre versus, trying to kind of extend the life cycle of spreadsheets from, the very like profound place they have in the art of the deal to the actual execution of the deal, right? Like we see teams that they're spreadsheet focused because they're not real time, because they're only as up, relative to tracking contingencies, spent to date, forecast, contracts, change orders, project documents, schedule items, right? It's only going to tell you as much and as accurately as you put time in keeping them updated. Nobody, very rare are people going to carve out an hour a day, every day, to go in and reconcile their spreadsheet and make sure that their spreadsheet is essentially a dashboard that's tracking their project real time, because there's too much trade-off administratively, which quickly, right, that'll just makes it to where as you're managing projects and at the point that you need to make decisions, it's easy to become reactive. Oh, I need to stay late tonight to figure this out, which obviously that slows down time to decision. That slows down schedule risk. Or, hey, like, I don't want to go reconcile this. That seems like a total pain. I'm going to have to call so many different people. I have to deal with my accountant. Oh, it's the worst part of my job. I have a pretty good instinct for what to do and then just make a gut-driven decision. And anybody in development, right, if you're successful in development, it means you got good intuition. So I don't want to take anybody's intuition off the table in development. But, and there's some scenarios, right, where you're not going to be 100% correct when you're making decisions on kind of intuitive gut-driven basis, right? And I think anybody in development also knows that data is just as important as intuition. So obviously being proactive and data-driven, that goes just around kind of, that's looped in right there with being, working efficiently versus working in a labor-intensive way. That goes in right connected with being, having accurate information versus having error-prone information that has keystroke issues or formula errors. That goes right together with the team. If you have a large organization with multiple different projects and development managers, executing projects, having consistency in the motion, or just, if you're doing one project at a time, it's the same people. Having kind of consistency in the motion is just as important, right? Because that allows you to create the ability to do that, like scaling without increasing the head count, right? Either way, consistency, repeatability is really important. Obviously, having this information visible, not being in silos of spreadsheets, whether it's like I'm managing a project and I'm trying to answer a question for my vendor and I have to go to accounting, I have to go look up the vendor contract, which is shared on my shared drive, and I have to do XYZ, rub my tummy, pat my head, to make a decision, right, to have all this information right at your fingertips. And all in all, right, being analytical. So these are like those baseline level kind of like, on a more kind of granular level when you're working in Northspyre, we hope you feel like you're on the left side of this kind of column versus the right side. And those are the things that are going to enable your team to, again, have, these desired wants and these outcomes that you're looking for as an organization. So I want to focus a little bit more kind of, that's that organizational level value down to a more kind of like individual kind of persona-based, like role-based value proposition. So you could think about, is X, Y, and Z person getting the value that I would hope they would get from Northspyre? Am I in this role getting the value that I would hope to get out of Northspyre? Or can we get more people getting more value out of Northspyre, right? At the end of the day, y'all have made a decision, right, to invest in a software product. We're thankful for that. We love our clients. And at the end of the day, right, we want you to get ROI. And we think there's a lot of different ways to get it. And a lot of that's about getting the team to kind of buy in and use it. So, even think about this, how you would like sell this to your team. This was some of the organizational level value to more detailed level. Sorry, I forgot I had one more slide here. The ability, let's just zoom out quickly before the individuals, like organizational level ROI, right? Margins, develop more, you can do more projects, more development fees. If you work more efficiently, you're making more profit on your development fees, given the fact that your development fees aren't getting eaten up by, unnecessary burden and overhead. And obviously decreased project costs, also allows you to increase returns. So we can go through kind of a laundry list of these. All of these I'll kind of hit on also based off of the kind of individual persona level stuff. So I'll go ahead and transition there. Sorry, I forgot to add one more little slide here. So internal stakeholders, talk about how we articulate that value. So executive level and leadership, right? We'll kind of start there. We're going to breeze through maybe kind of 10 different personas. These are the principals, the CEOs, executive vice presidents, partners, founders type roles, right? I think, what do they care about, right? I think they're one of you are on this call today. Returns, money, legacy, reputation, legacy, kind of one and the same, right? But a little bit different. And then I think impact, right? I think every developer, right, wants to, there's a reason why you're in development, right? It's a money-making business. But, a lot of developers also care about community, care about the projects they build, care about the impacts that they have on the community. And that's typically, to be passionate enough about it to take the risk to do deals. Obviously, you got to want to make money. But, oftentimes there's an underlying kind of care and like want to leave tangible, great like buildings in the built environment that surrounds our cities and our communities. So common challenges on the way to doing that, right? Development, the market dynamics, right? I think everybody seen this far more than I have, right? Like I'm not an industry vet. I can't act like one, but I was not doing development in 2008. So I cannot empathize on that level. But right, challenging market dynamics, right? And obviously, we've seen a version of that over the last, how long have we been in the interest rate hiking? A year and a half. The project execution risk, right? If your projects go awry, right, that's one, it's going to impact returns. Two, it's going to impact legacy. Three, it's going to impact reputation. Four, it's going to impact your ability to make impact on a community. Personnel changeover, right? Obviously, at the point where executive leader, right, you care, the people around you, you're setting the vision, but you're relying on a lot on kind of execution to deliver. And that's often a challenge, right? Because you don't have complete ownership and control over everything that happens. And then the ability to kind of like have portfolio level insight. Typically when you're in this like executive level chair, sometimes it's hard to understand what's going on in the weeds so that you can like really be attuned to the business. It's easy to get separated and silent. So thanks to where we want to create value for executive level leadership, right? One, improve relationships with lenders and financial partners. Your team's managing deals effectively, you are de-risking outcomes, you are delivering projects well, you're reporting accurately, you're reporting in transparent, real time. That's going to help relationships. Two, around to that key personnel risk, right? Instead of, maybe losing people and then they walk out with a lot of like institutional knowledge in terms of what project costs, what, market dynamics, vendor relationships, having that aggregated and benchmarked in Northspyre so that you have less risk on a personnel and institutional knowledge standpoint. Three, just being kind of data-driven, right, as an organization in your approach to just de-risking project execution, budget and schedule risk, and all those things that impact returns. The scalability of the platform, we talked about that, right? And then just obviously development is competitive, right? And it's kind of trying to reinforce and expand competitive advantages outside of just like, you might have a great thesis, right? How do you execute on that thesis? Like Northspyre, we might not help you with the thesis, but can we help you execute against it? Yeah. Senior development leadership, right? VPs of development, directors of development, that level, like kind of high level project executives. Obviously, what do they care about? Reputation for excellence, recognition from their peer group, right? They want a high performing team around them that they built and that they can take credit for to some degree, right? Same thing relative to community impact. You don't rise to this role in an organization unless you kind of also have that aspect that a leader or founder would have relative to community impact. And obviously, right, you want your deals to be well executed and high returning. Biggest challenges that we hear from people in this role, right, is just, as they scale, it used to be a development manager or development, lead, but now they have 3 people working up under them and they're not as close to the projects as they want to be. And they have kind of responsibility for, 3, 4, 5 projects at a time, 2, 3, 4, 5 employees. And that can create kind of lack of control and visibility over critical project data. Or the people they hire, right, are just like, they're not to the degree, they're not living up to the standards, or they have some lack of accountability around them that could make their job harder or make them have to micromanage. And obviously, right, I think at this level, right, you're relying on this development, you're the head coach, right, that you got 22 players on the field or whatever being your vendors, and, the execution of your projects. A lot of it comes down to how good your architect's drawings are, how good your general contractor is, and, a lot of these different kind of vendor relationships that you have. So value here, consistency, repeatability in that project management motion in a way that creates just like not only visibility for you, but just like accountability, and puts, call it bumper rails on the bowling alley lane around kind of execution from your team. Having better visibility, enhanced visibility, early indicators into where projects might be going awry. Like you should know where a project might have be forecasted to use too much contingency or schedule risk like well ahead of time as opposed to after the fact, right? That's going to make you better able to deliver about these things you care about. And then also just making sure your team's like focused on kind of the key strategic directions of your projects, as opposed to like, you don't want all your development managers just to push a paper all the time. That's certainly something that Northspyre will help that team with. Development managers, right? These are the, 24 to 35, not, year old, group or whatever. And I'll broaden that out a little bit. You can stay in development management for a lot longer than that. But, generally, right, these people want to get promoted. They want to distinguish themselves as A players. They want to manage and execute projects. They want to take stress off of their managers, right, so that they're then recognized. And they want to learn just how effective leaders work and think. Common challenges, right, to doing that is if you're pushing paper and just doing like menial administrative work all day, doing draw requests, forecasting, reporting, it's hard to really, first off, like make those strategic decisions and distinguish yourself. Obviously, if your vendors aren't like performing, that impacts you the same way it would impact that VP of development. And there's oftentimes this just trade-off at that development manager level in terms of being like really attuned, proactive, and strategic, as we've been talking about, when you're bogged down with administrative work. And it's hard to do both, right? If you commit to like accuracy and like organization and all these things, right, that a type A, person would commit to, or a data-driven person would commit to, it's just like, if it takes a lot of time, that's taking time away from you to commit to also do the kind of more strategic aspects of that role. So this one's the slam dunk with Northspyre, right? Just better control and visibility over your critical project data, the ability to kind of get on a phone with a vendor or a financial partner who's asking questions and make decisions quickly and effectively, communicate easily without having to say, hey, I don't know, let me get back to you tomorrow or 2 days or 3 days, right? That's like, what if your reputation could be a lot stronger if you got all the answers at the moment. That's how you get promoted, right? Obviously by decreasing time on administrative work and then just building that reputation. Let's keep rolling. Accounting executives. These are the CFOs that kind of, some CFOs, right, they're more investment acquisitions focused, but I'll kind of say more of the CFOs that are more accounting focused that kind of blend that chief accounting officer type role. Accurate bookkeeping, accounting compliance, stewardship of finances to maintain strong financial health, understanding of long-term financial needs of the business, right? Just to make sure that the founder wants to put like 20 projects under contract, it'd probably be a good thing for the, CFO or chief accounting officer to say like, hey, we have nowhere near enough working capital to do that right now, blah, blah, blah. And we're going to get a bunch of stalled out projects. There's kind of the strategic lens of that. What are the common challenges, right, regarding kind of project execution, right? It's just like disorganization and inaccuracy of the project cost accounting. Typically people's like overhead accounting is pretty straightforward, right? What your office costs, what your paper and supplies cost, like, I think everybody can handle that. But, the project cost accounting is very complex, right? And it's often not managed by the CFO, there's chief accounting officer, right? It's like a amalgamation of what's happening between the development managers and the accounts payable and the project accountants and the controllers, right? And it can get disorganized, right? Which impacts that ability to have that accurate bookkeeping. Or the poor visibility around that kind of financial planning aspect and then more kind of FP&A, financial planning and analysis, right? And to kind of future project spending projections, which makes it like hard to manage, but internal capital and also just like that investor management and capital calls and kind of look aheads in a proactive manner. So value for, the CFO and chief accounting officer, while we don't expect them to be the like day-to-day project managers and, controlling costs on an individual project, but when they need to, having access to real-time, accurate budget and cost information across projects, which all ties seamlessly into their accounting system, as well as to, do these more kind of strategic side of their roles relative to forecasting, cash flow projections. That makes that kind of financial planning side of their job easier. Down the line from accounting executives, accounting senior leadership, right? Let's talk about kind of the controller level. What do they care about, right? These are people that care about really accurate, very much the accurate bookkeeping and the accounting compliance, the month-end close being timely and easy, tax, audit, all that good stuff. A lot of the same challenges that the chief accounting officers and CFOs have relative to you're only as good as the accuracy in the organization relative to the projects, right? That might be kind of out of your control. But oftentimes these people will actually have some control over that and they have some responsibility around, if it's a small organization, these are, controllers are doing the AP, right? They're collating invoices, they're entering invoices. They're sometimes helping with the project level reporting or spreadsheets or draw requests. Or, they're getting bogged down by focusing on their jobs because they are getting constantly bombarded by calls from the founder, the VP of development, the development manager. Hey, can you look this up? Hey, can you pull this for me? Hey, can you put this information together for me? Which is just like a push and pull. And as far as to makes them have to constantly kind of context switch, which makes it hard to be really effective in their job. So obviously that accuracy in budget and cost accounting, that decrease in administrative work, kind of double handling invoices between spreadsheets and accounting software, and, these things relative to the draw request and reporting, all things that can help drive a controller's ability to get these things that they care about more easily. Let's go down one more, right? Project accountant, accounts payable, right? These are the people, that care about oftentimes one, job security. I think that is a common thing that we hear from this kind of sect, that they want to have job security. But, also they're trying to capture and reconcile costs. They're trying to get vendors paid on time, right? And they want to be a really valuable resource to their team. But it's hard, right, when their workflows are incredibly archaic, they're administrative, 80% of the time. Like, none of these people want to be a glorified admin. They might have become that and it's given them some type of job security, but I don't think it's really what people want to do, right? They want to be focused on, they want to be doing their job well, which means efficient and organized workflows for processing invoices and draw requests that removes strain from them, and it also removes strain off the organization and better operationalizes their responsibility, right? So not only does that give them job security, it also gives them kind of promotional aspirations as well. And then just less risk and error and accuracy in their work product. Like, no project accountant wants to get called, a budget that's out of date or inaccurate. A couple of different other personas here. Investments, acquisitions. These are the deal dogs. They want high returning deals. They want deal velocity, right? They want reputation for great deals, right? They want great reputations with brokers, other owners, right, that they might be doing deals with, financial partners. Common challenges, right, relative in the landscape of project execution and where Northspyre can help is, hey, they might put the deal together. It might look great on paper, but they're not responsible for necessarily executing on it. So it could not look really good on paper at the end of the day. And so they, the poor project execution kind of erodes, the returns that they had originally mapped out on the deal. Or, when they're putting, they're trying to be fast to market, speed to market, they want to put an informed budget together for an underwriting on a new project. And they got no access to really any reliable cost information for budgeting and assumptions, right? They're having to call, people inside the organization, walk back and down the hall. Hey, what's it cost these days for X, Y, and Z? All of that slow speed to market. And they can end up making some poor decisions, right? If they think a project that's really going to cost $100 million, if they're underwriting it to $75 million, that's a pretty big miss. And, all of that just kind of slowing the speed to market, and, they're not making offers on time or not making the right offers on time because of, some of these, that lack of access to reliable cost information. So big thing with Northspyre for these stakeholders, right? Well, they might not be the day-to-day kind of project management executives. We have a great offering relative to budget planning and historical data management that we encourage you should, if you want to get the max value of Northspyre, have the investments acquisitions analyst team, because these are the people typically are not hard hat people, right? That know everything that costs, that know that the last project that they underwrote at $100 million ended up costing $125 million at Y, because it's hard to know that, right? One, if it's trapped in spreadsheets, and two, if that's not your day-to-day responsibility, and three, you don't have the pain seared into your brain of having to deal with the change order on the back half. So big value of Northspyre is that access to historical data, right? And then just that better, just be able to sleep knowing that hey, I found a great deal and I know my team's going to execute on it, and it's not going to end up making my deal look like it wasn't a good deal because we had bad execution. Lastly, if you have your team that has internal construction managers is a different role than development managers. I'm talking about the people that, used to work superintendent, project manager at a construction company. You've hired them to kind of come in-house and really be kind of quality control, schedule control, oversight, and boots on the ground for a project, where a development manager, sometimes they're doing that hat, but sometimes, these organizations split that role. These people like to build, right? Quality construction, delivering projects on schedule. projects that go smoothly. That's what they get paid to do. And then obviously as part of doing that, really having good relationships with vendors. That's typically what they care about. I can obviously expand there. These people are kind of my brethren as a former project engineer and project manager. Common challenges, vendors, right? If you got bad vendors, it's hard enough to raise your voice. Been there before. Scope gaps, buyout issues, design flaws, things in the kind of a pre-construction process that end up just making your life miserable during construction. Or, right, like going back to the to that kind of investments and acquisitions teams, like problems inherited from just like overly aggressive budgets that weren't put together correctly in the first place, and schedules, right? And promises that people wrote that you have to uphold to. So again, that data-driven budget planning, ensuring budgets are informed, cradle to grave, big thing for the construction managers. They want to inherit a budget, right, at the time the shovel goes to dirt. That is good. It's tight. The contingency's right. Things are bought out, and all they got to do is make sure they keep things on track. With that, Northspyre has a really cool new product around. It's kind of an AI-assisted bid management, vendor selection, and bid leveling tool that has got construction manager tattooed on its head. Accurate construction kind of cost accounting relative to the how retainage is managed, material stored, and that GC pay application and requisition tool. That's a big value proposition that Northspyre can help drive for construction managers, so they're not having to sit there at the job site, job trailer once a month with the lender, the draw inspector and the GC, and the pay app's a mess, and you're arguing about work completed and stored to date. Then it takes 3 or 4 weeks to get the GC paid because of all the revisions, and then your sub stops showing up, and We can definitely streamline all of that relative to the construction manager role. And then I think one thing construction managers are often benefited by that Northspyre can provide is that, especially if they're one of those teams that's just like responsible for managing the general contractor and they don't know what a soft cost is. I mean, that's not every construction manager, but some. And this is hard cost. It's probably good for them to have kind of an overall visibility into the overall development budget, the overall development schedule, and kind of the broader kind of like economics of the deal to help them know, why their role, so they have context for their decision-making. So those are all the internal stakeholders I want to talk about, and I'm going to breeze through external, right? Articulating the value, because sometimes, right, a lot of our clients are underwriting Northspyre into their development budgets. Who's paying for that? At least initially, lenders and financial partners. So it probably behooves you to be able to sell this really well to those people. And it's easy to, because what's good for you is good for them, right? What do lenders care about? Obviously, they want to make their interest, right? They also want to get their principal back. What are their common challenges? Bad borrowers, right? That they screw up deals and they have to work out. Nobody wants that. Maybe the only lender that wants that is a lender that also has a development arm that can take your deal over for cheap. But there's not many of those, right? Insolvency, right? Poor administrative oversight by borrower, right? Nobody wants pictures of the Home Depot receipts, right? Or bad draw requests that had errors in them that just increases the strain on the internal resources of the lender, right? That's going to that will get back to the loan officer, right, from the asset management team or whatnot. It will get up to the relationship manager, and it will impact your ability to do a deal with them in the future. What do they get value from Northspyre? All the things, right, that YouTube. But also they have they sleep better at night. They have better visibility, accuracy, transparency into project performance. They have more professional and proactive project management, ensuring project execution. And it's basically the same thing on the JV side, right? Obviously, JVs, there's not interest, right? It's returns, distributions, as outlined, missing a D in the deal structure. Obviously, all the same common challenges, right, that lenders have, and then the same value, pretty much, right? So hopefully this got your mind working relative to, not homework, but things I want you to chew on, right? As we think about that organizational value earlier, right? Have you pigeonholed yourself and you're only thinking about, the value of Northspyre relative to, call it less administrative work or budget risk, right? What are the other ways that your organization get value? Hey, are you seeing that your development principal or partner is doesn't care about Northspyre and they're laissez-faire? Hey, I don't care about this. You do you, right? They're missing out, right? Same thing kind of up and down the org ladder. If the next time you have a conversation with a lender and a JV partner, right? Like, yeah, it really should be easy to sell like what because you're selling your organization, right? You're selling that you're professional, that you're going to deliver, and that you have the resources to do that. And the resources, right? One's your track record, obviously, all which proves that. But two is obviously, and three is your people, and four is the tools and the software, right, that enable you to do that. All of which is good for them. Next time your lender says, well, or somebody says, oh, well, what about my lender's spreadsheet? The only reason why your lender is giving you a spreadsheet to fill out your draw request, because if they didn't, they were solving for stupid, right? And I say that, right? They're trying to like solve for the base case borrower, which is the borrower that has never done a project before, that, it's a risk management thing on their side, right? Bring, in at the closing table, right? Or while you're kind of putting things together, like as part of like talking about how the operating plan or the operating JV structure, if it's an investor, I talk about the resources you're bringing and how you're going to manage the project and why they should feel good about you based off of the tool, not only your great reputation and your great people, but the great resources you bring. So I said 4:30, it's 4:43. I'll stick around. If anybody has, wants to chit chat, throw some questions into the Q&A. If anybody has any questions, feel free to come off mute. If y'all think I am crazy, I always like to hear that as well. And anything that spoke to you today that you kind of want to understand, like, okay, I get it. Like, I like the buzzwords. I like the vision. How? Show me how, right? It would be a good time. Obviously, we can have that conversation. We can kind of like translate these things to direct kind of training, product features, action items for the organization. Just as a quick look ahead, May 8th, what is that, Wednesday? We'll talk about one of these things, talk about translating ROI and kind of value proposition to actual kind of learning of the product. We're going to focus on managing your project schedule and some of the different ways that Northspyre can help drive better visibility and accountability and execution around, key tasks and milestones across the entire development, not just your construction schedule, but importantly, your due diligence milestones, design milestones, entitlement milestones, permitting milestones, capital, financing milestones. Stabilization milestones on the back end. And we're going to keep doing these while the getting's good, because we got a lot, obviously Northspyre is a really powerful product and is the operating system and kind of command center for your development teams. We want you guys to get the full value of everything that we have to offer. Lily, any housekeeping?
No, that's all. Thank you guys so much for joining, and we will be able to share this recording out with you hopefully pretty soon. So I hope you guys have a great weekend.
All right. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.